Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a weird day today here in suburban Chicago. The weather is eminently nice. It's in the 60s, and it's raining, but it's this sort of weird spotty raining where it's raining a little bit, but not really. And it's drizzly, but not too drizzly. So I'm out walking. I don't have an umbrella. I'm just living my best life walking around. But things get more complicated. So I recorded a podcast yesterday. In fact, the same content that I'm going to record for you today, because I love you all so much, I'm going to re-record a podcast. And when I got home, I downloaded the episode and put it into my audio editor, and it was blank. I was like, what? So then I went and I plugged in the mic. I thought, oh, the mic must have gotten half unplugged or something. Plugged in the mic, tried it again, nothing. Boom, dead. So then I got an old mic, nothing, boom, dead. And I'm like, but that old mic I put aside, I think, because it wasn't working very well. So then I got out a different kind of mic, plugged that in, worked fine. So it tells me my phone is, I use an old cell phone, I think I mentioned, to record this podcast, and it's working fine. But the mic is dead. So I've ordered a new mic. But in the meantime, I don't have a lav mic with which to record this podcast. But I have a lot to say, and I really don't want to wait another 2 days until the lav mic gets here to record the next episode of the podcast. So I'm trying it a different way. I'm holding the phone in front of my face with the recording option on, kind of like a caveman, like in the olden times, like they would have recorded podcasts. That's how I'm doing it. So if the timbre sound of my sound is a little different today, that's why. Hopefully it's not so bad that I have to throw out the episode again. So here we go. When I first started doing this podcast, I did a series called The Great Designers, where I would talk about designers who represented a significant chunk of my board game collection, namely that I had 5 or more of their games. In the past 3 years, my collection has grown substantially, and I've added to that list. I keep a geek list on Board Game Geek of all the designers who meet that criteria. Head to Board Game Geek, or head to rattleboxgames.com and look for the show notes for this episode to find a link to that geek list. And I realized recently that I hadn't updated that list in a while. So I went through and I found somebody who, in the first days of that list, I mentioned as an up-and-comer because I owned 3 of their games, and this was Phil Walker Harding, or as they call it on Raul Gaviola's show, PWH. I think they also call him that on Shuffle Buddies. I'm not sure if one of them got it from the other, or if they both came to it independently, or if I'm misattributing it, but there it is. So Phil Walker Harding is a designer of some high renown now. He's had a number of pretty significant hits, and I enjoy his games quite a bit. I would say his design approach tends to be characterized by simple sets of rules that interact in interesting ways. He definitely designs for the welcoming market and the sort of welcoming plus market, where you have individuals coming who are new to the hobby, who are playing a pretty simple game, and then individuals who are a little bit further in, who can get a game that really satisfies that crunchier itch, but still connects back and is simple enough that new players or relatively new players can dive in. So that's how I would describe his design philosophy. As far as I know, he doesn't have any truly heavy games. That doesn't seem to be his bailiwick, but there it is. So I thought what I'd do is talk about the 8 games that I own that he has, and the 3 other games that I've played of his, and just talk about them in how much I like them, back to front. Although I'm going to start with games that are sort of outside that back to the front arc, and that is the 2 different chapters or versions of adventure games. I have Volcanic Island and I have The Dungeon. Now, adventure games are in the same sort of realm of experience as time stories or Unlock, as games that involve puzzles, that involve narrative adventure, and are one-play games, meaning that after you've played them once, you're probably not going to play them again because you've, uncovered the story. So, our family has played through part of Volcanic Island, and we haven't played The Dungeon yet. I like this system. It's interesting. I like the choices and the stories being told. I don't like it as much as Time Stories, the original run. The newer ones haven't been as great. Even though it comes in the same size box as Unlock, it's a very different experience. It's much closer to Time Stories, or even that not great Choose Your Own Adventure game that they released from Funko Game, or from Prospero Hall. Those games feel much more focused on storytelling rather than puzzle solving. And that's fine. I really like that aspect of the volcano game, of Volcano Island, but not as much as Time Stories. So I haven't played the dungeon at all yet. The one thing I do about those games is they are made to be played in chapters. I think there's 3 or 5 chapters per game, and a chapter takes a couple hours to play. So you'd have to really devote all day if you wanted to do it all in one sitting. Unfortunately, by breaking it up, you hit the situation we're in, which is where it's been so long since we played the volcanic island. I'm not sure I remember what was going on. So you'd probably have to read some sort of summary before we jumped back in. Okay, so those games are kind of outside the arc, but they are games I own. So those are 2 of the 8 Phil Walker Harding games that I own. And now what I'll talk about are the games in increasing complexity. So to start with, the 2 very simple, welcoming games that I have from Phil Walker Harding are Sushi Go and Sushi Roll. Essentially, Sushi Go and Sushi Roll are the same game. They just use slightly different mechanisms. Another way to articulate Sushi Roll is it's Sushi Go, the dice game. In both of these games, it is a simple set collection game built on top of a simple drafting mechanism. Now, for people outside the hobby, drafting, this is a relatively new thing. Other than the game Spoons, I can't really think of very many games where you would do what modern hobby board gamers call drafting, where you take a hand of cards, you pick one, then you pass the hand of cards to the next player and they pick one. Meanwhile, you're picking one from the hand of cards that was passed to you. In fact, on the packaging for the original Sushi Go, it says Sushi Go, the pick and pass game. So they're really doubling down or focusing in on that particular aspect of how they explain what drafting is. And that works out fine, I think. As to the 2 different games, I don't have Sushi Go Party, which is the way if I were to buy it today, if I lost my copy of Sushi Go, I would buy a new copy. I'd buy Sushi Go Party. We don't play it enough to make it worth having both, or to go out and buy it again. But Sushi Go Party has a wider variety of different sushi types. Sushi Roll, like I said, uses dice. Both games are set collection games where you're trying to get different collections of different kinds of sushi, and different kinds of sushi score in different ways. So being careful with how you arrange the collection is a key part of playing the game. These games are great they're great as welcoming games for people who haven't played much in the way of hobby board games before. They're simple, they're fun themes, they're easy to learn, and ultimately they set up players to learn to enjoy what's going on in hobby board games. All right, so that's games, I guess, 3 and 4 of my collection of Phil Walker Harding games. That's Sushi Go and Sushi Roll. Next up, I'll include what I'd call my Welcoming Plus games. These are games that are slightly more complex. They take a little bit more effort, but they're still pretty welcoming to new players. And that would be the 2 tile laying games that he's come out recently with, and that is Gingerbread House and Llama Land. Gingerbread House is themed around the iconic fairy tale character of the witch who lived in the gingerbread house. And in that game, you are in a fairy tale world and you're building a gingerbread house, but all these jerks in the fairy tale world come by and keep eating your house. So you start setting things up to attract them so you can capture them and make them pay for eating your house. That's the premise. The gameplay is pretty simple. You have I think 4x4 grid on your board, and the game is played using these 2x1 tiles. And on your turn, you're going to put a tile on your board, and then you collect the resources that you covered up when you played on your board. As you go along, it's actually a 3x3 grid now that I think about it. As you lay the tiles out, you're slowly going to build vertically as well, building different floors in your house. It might be 4x4. I can't remember. But either way, you're slowly building your house up and accumulating these resources. While you're doing that, you also collect these scoring cards, which is one of the things that makes the game a little bit more complex. And you're going to collect visitors, the people who have come by, and you attract them by spending resources based on what you covered up. The other game that's very similar to this, you might argue it's a little more complex, but it's so close that I think it probably fits the same ballpark, and that is Llama Land. Llama Land is a newer release from Phil Walker Harding that also uses these different tiles and also involves building them up on your own personal player board. And on your turn, when you take a tile, you can either build the tile out or you can build the tile up. If you build the tile up, then you get to buy a llama, and the llamas are both the engines for scoring and the conditions for winning. And then you can also build, that's if you build out. If you build up, then you get resources, and the resources allow you to allow you to buy those llamas when you get the chance. So it's kind of a back and forth on that game. You also are allowed to score these objective goals that come out. And the earlier that you claim an objective goal, the more points you'll get for completing it. But you only have 2 or 3 of the objective tokens, and there's like 6 objective cards, I think. So you have to pick which ones you're trying to go for. And you could switch later, but when you switch, you have to go further down on the little sheet or on the scoring thing. So someone else who picked that objective earlier than you has a better shot of getting lots of points for it. Both Llama Land and Gingerbread House have about the same cognitive load to my mind. I think Gingerbread House is a smidge easier to engage with. Both games are really fun. They involve a surprising amount of tactical depth that compared to what you'd think they have based on the starting point of the game. That said, there's not a lot of strategic depth there. You can't plan ahead too much because what's available to take and what resources you're able to get are really contingent on what tiles you're able to play. So, and that's true of Gingerbread House as well. Both games, the interaction comes from racing other players to get things that they want and get things that you want. So it's a very Euro style interaction. Both games are really fun. They have cute themes, and I think if you have one and you're medium on it, you don't really need the other. I don't think one is specifically better than the other in very many ways. I'm happy to have both as a Phil Walker Harding fan, and because I think Llama Land is more fun in the spring and summer, and Gingerbread House makes more sense in the fall and winter. So they're going to be seasonal games for me, I suspect. Now that I think about it, there's one more game to discuss, and that is Silver and Gold. Silver and Gold is another sort of welcoming plus level game. This is a flip and write game in which you are writing on cards, which is kind of a neat innovation, and it's themed around pirates. This one's interesting because there's a couple different ways that the cards score, and the different things that you accumulate when you get the cards works out nicely. It's again a nice, light, welcoming plus type game with interesting mechanisms, but the theme is almost entirely absent. The pirate theme is basically nonsense, and there's not really much reason to worry about it. I think Silver and Gold's fun and fine, but it's not, I don't even know if it would make my top 5. Okay, so that's games 5, 6, and 7, which means I have 2 games left to talk about, and these are going to be my top 2 Phil Walker Harding games. We'll get to those in a minute. First, I want to take a moment to offer some exemptions. A couple games of Phil Walker Harding's that I'm either I don't like, or I don't like very much, and I'm not planning to buy, or some mix of those. So the first one, the one I'm not planning to buy, is Super Mega Lucky Box. This game got a lot of positive buzz in the autumn, and I can see why. It's a Phil Walker Harding design. It's flip and write. It sounds like an iteration on Silver and Gold. But given that I didn't really like Silver and Gold that much, and I have quite a few roll and writes or flip and write games, I'm not that intrigued to try to buy Super Mega Lucky Box without at least trying it first. So that one's definitely on my try before I buy list. I played Cloud City a couple times on Board Game Arena, and I thought it was fine, but essentially it feels to me like a watered down version of the expansion to Barron Park, so no need for that. It was fine, but again, not a game I'm gonna seek out to purchase. And last one is the only one of the most well-renowned Phil Walker Harding games, but also the one I like the least, and this is Imhotep, Monuments in Egypt. I don't like it. The game has this weird mechanism by which you can either play a cube or move a boat, and when you move a boat, you choose where it goes and then how the cubes are going to distribute. And so often what you do is you move a boat when your opponent doesn't want you to, and kind of set yourself up as best you can, but as often it's not about screwing them up. And I just don't like it. I've played it once in person a long time ago, and I really didn't like it. And then I played it twice more in digital implementation on Board Game Arena, and I still didn't like it. So something about that particular design does not fit to me. And I guess In that regard, I'm also not that interested in Imhotep the Duel, which is the 2-player version of that game that Phil Walker Harding released more recently. So that leads me to the last 2 games in the episode, my 2 favorite Phil Walker Harding games. The first one is Gizmos. Gizmos is a pure engine builder. It's definitely in the light or medium weight hobby game, light to medium weight hobby game. Maybe this, if you're articulating it, you have welcoming games, then welcoming plus, and then you have light to medium weight hobby games. So this is, the next step up. In this game, it is pure engine builder. You have a couple different actions you can take, and you have these cards that you can get, and the cards do things based on the actions you take. So when you take an action, you trigger the cards that activate when you take that action and do what they say. And the nice thing is this game is all about chain reactions. So you get a card that lets you take a red marble, then you get another card that does a thing when you take a red marble. So you take a red marble, and then you get to activate the card that does a thing. It starts off a little slow, but by the end of the game, you have these huge machines that take a long time to run, such that I've added cubes to my set of gizmos so that you can keep track of which cards you've activated, because you're only allowed to activate each card once. The theme is pretty much non-existent, but the game's called Gizmos. It doesn't really seem like it has a theme. Like I said, pure engine builder, really interesting, fun to play. I think ultimately it's not going to displace games that have a better theme, but if you're in the mood for like a 45-minute, really good, quick engine building game with heavy tactics, because it's all about which cards are available, then Gizmos is probably for you. And finally, my favorite Phil Walker Harding game, heads and shoulders above the others, a top 50 game for me, certainly, and a game that I think everybody should play at least a few times, and this is Baron Park. Baron Park is one of those games that I decided I was going to buy it while I was playing it for the first time, and I went over and bought it. This was at Origins 2017. I went over and bought it from the Mayday booth right after we were done playing. It was an immediate buy for me. Love it. In this game, you are building a bear park. You are putting out tiles, and as you cover up things, you get things. But generally what you get is more tiles, and you can only play 1 tile per turn. So if you're effective, sometimes you give yourself flexibility of choice by getting 2 or 3 tiles in your bank, even though you can only play 1 each turn. You're trying to get points by playing the high point scoring tiles. You're trying to get points by completing the different building spaces. You're going to use 4 different building tiles over the course of the game, and each building tile that you complete lets you take another one. But when you finish filling them in, you get to put a statue on, and those statues are worth a ton of points. So it's a race to finish your board. It's a race to get those statues, and it's really fun. There's also score conditions that get added on top of that work out really nicely. And overall, it's an excellent game, well worth your time if you get a chance to play Baron Park. And then on top of it, they have the stupidly named Bad News Bears expansion, which adds grizzlies and monorails, both of which really heighten the complexity of the game in terms of what you have to think about as you're playing. Or I should say the depth. They add a little bit of complexity, but they add a lot of depth. And it really turns Baron Park from a medium or light to medium weight, almost welcoming plus game into a really big brain burner, which is part of what I love about it. Playing the game with both expansions and all the rules, it really melts your brain, and I love how that works. So Phil Walker Harding's Baron Park is top tier for me. So I'm curious, listeners, have you played any of these games? What do you think of them? Have I missed any essential Phil Walker Harding PWH glory? What else should I be seeking out to round out my PWH collection? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts on the issue with me. You can also send me an email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com, or send me a direct message on Board Game Geek Wombat 929. If you'd like to play a game with me, I'd love to play a game with you. You can do so by joining me on Board Game Arena, Boitajou, or yukata.de, all places where I play board games asynchronously. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.